My relationship with my mom has always been complicated. She has this uncanny ability to twist any situation into something about her, almost like a superpower, albeit a toxic one. For most of my adult life, I've kept her at arm's length. Now 26, I'm married and have 2 wonderful kids. My life is messy, chaotic, and full, but in the best possible ways. Over the years, I've worked hard to set firm boundaries with her. Yet, despite my efforts, she always manages to find a way through. The latest breach came in the form of her upcoming wedding. It's her 3rd time tying the knot, and though she's only 47, her fiancé is noticeably younger. I couldn't tell you how much younger. I've never cared enough to ask. I've met him a few times at family gatherings, and every time he gave me a bad vibe. He's the quiet type, which isn't inherently a problem, but the way he stares at people is unsettling, like he's trying to read your deepest secrets. I've disliked him from the start. Last week, my mom invited me over to catch up. When I showed the text to my husband, he encouraged me to go. He knows how strained my relationship with her is, but thought maybe she was making an effort, perhaps trying to turn over a new leaf. I wasn't convinced, but for the sake of giving her a chance, and for the kids, I decided to go. From the moment I arrived, the atmosphere was off. My mom and her fiancé were seated on the couch, sipping coffee, and it felt like they had been waiting for me, almost like it was a scheduled appointment. Oddly, she didn't offer me anything to drink or eat, which is unusual for her. "Thanks for coming," she said with a strained smile, motioning for me to sit. I took a seat opposite them, already uneasy. She began with a practiced speech about family and second chances. She was overly sentimental, her words rehearsed, almost robotic. I wasn't paying much attention. Her tone alone was enough to tell me this wasn't genuine. Then, out of nowhere, she said something that jolted me out of my detachment. "You know I can't have children anymore because of my surgery," she said. I nodded. This wasn't news. Years ago, she'd had a hysterectomy due to health issues. I still didn't see where she was going with this, but I remained silent. "Well," she continued, leaning forward, her eyes bright with excitement, "we've been thinking about ways to make our family complete." "Okay," I said cautiously, not understanding. Then she dropped the bombshell. "We want you to have a baby for us." For a moment I thought I'd misheard. Surely, she couldn't mean what it sounded like. I stared at her, then at her fiancé, expecting them to laugh or reveal it as some sort of twisted joke. But neither of them did. He just stared back, his expression unreadable, while she looked at me with anticipation. "What?" I asked, stunned. "It makes perfect sense," she said, as though it were the most logical thing in the world. "You're young, healthy, and you've already had 2 kids. You'd be perfect for this." I could feel the blood draining from my face. "Perfect for what? Are you serious?" "You're overreacting," she said dismissively. "This would be such a beautiful gift to us. Women do this all the time. It's not a big deal." I stood up, unable to remain seated any longer. "Absolutely not. This is insane." Her fiancé spoke for the first time, his tone disturbingly calm. "We could do it naturally, or through a doctor. Whatever you're comfortable with." I turned to him, my voice shaking with disgust. "You're vile." My mom rolled her eyes, as if I were a petulant child. "You're being dramatic," she said. "You wouldn't have to do anything after the baby is born. We'd take care of everything. You'd just be helping us out." I couldn't take it anymore. Without another word, I stormed out and drove home. The entire way, my mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. How could my own mother think something so grotesque was even remotely acceptable? When my husband got home that evening, I knew I had to tell him. There was no way I could keep something like this to myself. I recounted the entire ordeal, and as I spoke, I saw his jaw tighten. When I finished, he stood up abruptly, grabbed his jacket, and said, "We're going over there." "Let's leave it alone," I pleaded. "They're unhinged. Nothing we say will change that." But he was resolute. "We're going." When we arrived at her house, he didn't bother knocking. He walked right in. My mom was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, while her fiancé flipped through a magazine at the counter, both of them acting as though everything was perfectly normal. "We need to talk," my husband said, his voice cold and sharp. My mom looked up, surprised. "What's this about?" You know exactly what this is about, he snapped. She sighed, setting the knife down as if we were inconveniencing her. Oh, for heaven's sake. Are you really here to yell at me over something so trivial? Trivial? My husband's voice rose. You asked my wife to carry your husband's child. That's not trivial. It's disgusting. She waved her hand dismissively. We weren't asking her to do it for free, she said, as though that made it better. We'd make sure she was comfortable. And it's not like she'd have to raise the baby. Her fiancé chimed in, his tone eerily composed. This doesn't have to be a big deal. Surrogacy is a generous thing to do for family. My husband turned to him, his fists clenched. Don't even start. You think asking my wife to sleep with you is surrogacy? You're out of your mind. My relationship with my mother has always been a tangled web of manipulation, guilt, and resentment. She has this almost supernatural ability to turn any situation, no matter how unrelated, into something about herself. It's as if she thrives on being the center of attention, even if it comes at the expense of others. For years, I've worked tirelessly to create distance and set firm boundaries. But with her, boundaries are mere obstacles to be trampled over. I'm 26 now, married, and the mother of 2 incredible children. My life is messy and chaotic in all the best ways, filled with love and laughter. Yet somehow, my mother always finds a way to wedge herself into my peace and wreak havoc. Her latest intrusion came in the guise of her upcoming wedding, her third. At 47, she's marrying a younger man, though I couldn't tell you how much younger. I've met him a handful of times, and each encounter has left me unsettled. He has this unnerving habit of staring, silent and calculating, as though he's peeling back layers of your soul. Then came the invitation. My mother wanted me to catch up. When I showed the text to my husband, he encouraged me to go, thinking perhaps she was trying to reconcile or turn over a new leaf. Reluctantly, I agreed, not because I believed her intentions were genuine, but because I wanted to give her one last chance. For the sake of closure, if nothing else. When I arrived, the atmosphere was immediately off. She and her fiancé were sitting on the couch, sipping coffee, their postures stiff, their smiles forced. They looked as though they'd rehearsed this moment. She didn't offer me anything, not a drink, not a snack, just motioned for me to sit as though we were in a business meeting. Thanks for coming, she said, her voice sugary sweet but hollow. I took a seat across from them, my instincts screaming that something was wrong. She began with a monologue about family, forgiveness, and second chances. It was overly sentimental, and her words felt rehearsed. I wasn't really listening, until she dropped the bomb. We want you to have a baby for us. I blinked, convinced I'd misheard. My gaze darted between her and her fiancé, expecting someone to laugh and reveal it was some sick joke. But no, they were serious. Deadly serious. You're young, healthy, and already a mother. It just makes sense, she said, as if it were the most logical request in the world. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Are you out of your mind? I asked, my voice trembling with shock and anger. You're overreacting, she replied dismissively. This would be such a beautiful gift to us. Women do it all the time. It's not a big deal. Her fiancé chimed in, his voice eerily calm. We could do it naturally or medically. Whatever you're comfortable with. My stomach churned. You're vile, I hissed at him, standing up. My mother rolled her eyes like I was a petulant teenager. You wouldn't have to do anything after the baby is born. We'd take care of everything. You'd just be helping us out. I didn't bother responding. I stormed out, drove home, and spent the next hour in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what had just happened. When my husband returned from work, I told him everything. He was furious. We're going over there, he said, grabbing his jacket. Let it go, I pleaded. They're insane. Nothing we say will change that. But he was determined. We're going. When we arrived, my husband didn't bother knocking. He marched straight into her house, his jaw clenched. My mother was in the kitchen, casually chopping vegetables, while her fiancé leaned against the counter, flipping through a magazine. We need to talk, my husband said, his voice like steel. What's this about? My mother asked, feigning ignorance. You know damn well what this is about, he snapped. She sighed, setting down her knife. Are you really here to yell at me over something so trivial? Trivial? His voice rose. You asked my wife to carry your husband's child. That's not trivial. It's disgusting. Her fiancé finally looked up. It doesn't have to be like that, he said nonchalantly. We could do it medically if that's the issue. The issue, my husband growled, stepping closer, is that you even thought this was okay to suggest. My mother crossed her arms defensively. I thought you cared about family. She is my family, he shot back, pointing at me. And I'm here to make sure you and this creep don't pull any more of your twisted stunts. Her fiancé stood, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. You don't have to talk to her like that. And what are you going to do about it? My husband challenged, stepping closer. There was a tense silence before my mother finally broke it. You know what? Maybe it's best if you leave. Clearly, you're not in the right mindset for a civilized conversation. This is the last conversation we'll ever have, my husband said, grabbing my arm and leading me out the door. As we left, my mother called after us, "You'll regret this. Don't come crawling back when you need help." That should have been the end of it. But with my mother, nothing is ever truly over.